All right, welcome back. We're wrapping up our final portion of the negligence discussion with the topic of causation and damages. So these are our two final elements of the four parts of negligence, and so we're going to dive right in. Now, these are complicated ideas. We're going to really simplify it for our purposes here and know that there's a lot more to it and we could really debate it. And what I'm going to be looking for, especially when we get to the exams, is that you just have a basic understanding of the idea and that you have a good argument in how to use them, not whether it's necessarily right or wrong. So we're really taking a surface understanding of this topic. But causation has two specific parts to it. You must establish that there is both actual causation and proximate causation. Of those two, actual causation is the easiest, or at least most straightforward one to analyze. We usually ask this question, but for the incident, would it have happened? And if you can say that but for these actions, then yes, there is actual causation. So let me give you an example. In our case where we looked at the motocross track, but for the motocross track owner burying metal, the motocross racer would not have cut off his finger. Okay, that is a true statement, and since it's true, we can say, but for those actions, this happened. We can establish actual causation. So another example, and with our Curry versus Chevron case, but for the attendant authorizing and starting that pump, the perpetrator would not have had the ability to pour gasoline on the victim and light them on fire. So we just established, but for the incident happening, the action occurred, the negligent action occurred, the breach occurred. And when we can find that but for, then we've established actual causation. So it's fairly easy to establish, at least it's straightforward to establish, and that's what we'll be looking for, at least on the exam, is that you can make a good argument that actual causation exists or doesn't exist. Proximate causation is a little bit more complicated. It's more complicated in the sense that we need to think again to what is reasonably foreseeable. What could we reasonably imagine happening? So just because something actually happened doesn't mean that it was reasonably foreseeable to happen. I find this graphic valuable. Let's imagine that you are driving a motorcycle. It is reasonably foreseeable that you might rear-end someone and cause an injury to them or their vehicle. It's also reasonably foreseeable that your running into the back of the car might cause that car to bump someone else in front or swerve, but it could hit somebody else. So that is certainly within the realm of foreseeability. It's also foreseeable that that person, these people that get hit, might fall into something or fall off a bridge or fall off the road. But what if these people, they fall through a window and they fall into someone who's brushing their teeth in that room inside the building, and that person falls out of the room and gets hurt? At some point we have to cut this off and say these things are no longer foreseeable. It's not reasonable to imagine this would happen. And so again, there's no bright line rule, but you have to use your intuition and your instinct on where you think that reasonably foreseeable line is drawn. So our motocross case, is it reasonably foreseeable that he would fall and cut his finger? Yes, it is. Is it reasonably foreseeable that that authorizing the pump would lead to somebody being set on fire? Ooh, I don't know. That's a little more difficult, right? That it's not something we normally imagine. And, that's where you might debate this case. So I want to talk about a very famous reasonable foreseeability case, and that is PALSGRAF. And the PALSGRAF case was between Mrs. PALSGRAF and the railroad, and she was a woman who was sitting near the train tracks at a rail depot, and a gentleman, ran up to try to catch the train that was already leaving the station, and he had a bag with him. And he ran, tried to catch it, the train was already moving, and the train attendants lifted him up, pushed him on. And in the process of pushing him onto the train, he dropped the bag in his hands. The bag fell, it the sparks from the train, or at least some kind of metal, caused some combustion, and lo and behold, in the bag are fireworks, and the fireworks explode and they shoot all over the place, and the reverberations from this cause a scale to topple over onto Mrs. Palsgraf, one of these massive old weigh scales for luggage, and injures her. There's a lot of stuff that happened here. You know, this is sort of bizarre, right? Because we would not have expected this gentleman to be carrying a bag of fireworks. We might expect that if you had fireworks, you know, they might set on fire, but they're being set on fire by the train, which is strange. And you could imagine somebody getting hurt from the fireworks directly, but in this case, the fireworks, actually, the explosion caused reverberation that caused something else to topple. So in the famous Palsgraf case, we fail to find proximate causation because it's not, all of these things are not reasonably foreseeable. It is a big stretch to imagine all these things happening. So we don't always find things to be reasonably foreseeable. Again, there's no bright line rule here. You are going to be making a judgment call and a good argument for whether it's reasonably foreseeable or not. And, you know, it's up to you to decide, but make your case. So if we can establish reasonable foreseeability and actual causation, then we have established the causation element of negligence. Fairly straightforward, and, you know, use your best argument there. Final topic is damages. Damages, this is the most straightforward one. There always has to be some kind of damage for there to be negligence. It needs to be damage to person, to property, sometimes emotional distress, but you have to have a physical manifestation of that emotional distress, usually being physically sick somehow, throwing up, being hospitalized. Those are the kind of things that we look for when we want to find emotional distress. But all you have to do is prove that there was some kind of physical damage to person or property, and you've established damages. That's it. We've got all of our elements: duty, breach, causation, and damages. If you find all of those things, you've established negligence.